Nation resolution, but until today, that promise has not been delivered to them, and that's why we have what we call it an ongoing civil war in Kashmir. The people are resisting the Indian illegal occupation, but India has been hiding under many pretexts, the war on terrorism, and of course declaring that there is much to do, the unrest is much to do with the Pakistan supporting the jihadis. To really unpack all these things, we have a very, very proficient panel. But what we're going to actually focus on today, the phenomena of a Kashmiri half widow. The half widow, what is a half widow? Those are our brothers, those are the young youth, those who went to fight against the Indian resistance. That's the way that we have in South Africa. The Nelson Mandela took the arms when he see there was all the decent ways, all the legal ways was exhausted, and they could not see ANC will be able to bring the peace to South Africa. Then of course they took the arms, and exactly what's happening. The resistant fighters are fighting. Those are now being labeled by the India under the pretext of war on terrorism. And of course, for the last 20 years, India has made a lot of hay when the sun was shining under the name and pretext of war on terrorism. A lot of people, international community, let India go and kill many people. Over 100,000 people have been killed, and there is no law and order. There is a perpetual curfew, and there has been a lockdown because India provided in 1954 an autonomous status through the amendment to their own constitution, and that was Article 370-35A. Now, that has been revoked because that autonomous status is no longer valid. And on the 5th of August 2019, the Modi, the fascist, the regime of a BJP have revoked that article illegally, unilaterally, and without no respect of a United Nations resolution on Kashmir. But by the Secretary General, that has been reiterated that India's unilateral decision has not going to hold any ground because it is an international dispute territory. It's the Kashmir belong to the Indian people. Now, for that resistant fight, many young youth and the people who fighting for the resistance as a resistance army, and the many people, those who resist that Indian illegal occupation, either they have died, become martyr, or they have disappeared. There is more than 30,000 people are unaccounted for, and that's create a phenomena of the half widows of Kashmir and the forced disappearance, because we do not know, the family does not know, the kids do not know, the wife do not know, the parent does not know where these people are, where they have been kept. And under that cloud, the sisters, those whose husband has been taken away by force, whether they're still alive or not, we do not know. So we call that phenomena a half widows of Kashmir. To really unpack, I have a very proficient and a very knowledgeable panel. We have a Dr. ATHER, who is a PhD in a political anthropologist. We have a Dr. SHAGUFTA, which is from the Kotli University in Azad Kashmir. We have Claire BIDWELL, she is the school teacher, educationalist, and very good support and a friend of a Kashmiri liberation and fighting for the Kashmir. We're going to be joined by Michelle Malik, the wife of Yasin Malik, husband who is a political activist, a separatist activist, has been in a jail for many years, and she has in the last 12 years spent only 60 days with him. Most of the time he spent in a jail. We will be inshallah ta'ala joined by a special guest all the way from Srinagar, Seher Shabir, and she is the daughter of a famous Shabir Shah who is in a jail for 30 years. So before further ado, I'd like to bring our panelists in place, and of course each panelist will have a 10-minute to speak, and then we will be going a little bit of interaction with the panelists, and then we will be moving into question session answer. Dr. Zia, the floor is yours. Please unpack. I know we're going to have continuation of this program because this Kashmir half widows create a implication on the social ecosystem of the society, and it's not just only the phenomena of not knowing the emotional and psychological. it is a economic problem, it is a social problem, it's create many problems, it create a religious problem. So we will be having a series of the program, but what we're going to do and how we're going to preamble this phenomena, I leave it into the hand, very capable hand of Dr. Zia. And Dr. Zia, floor is yours. Dr. Zia, I cannot hear you. Can you please unmute your mic?
I'm sorry. Yeah, I didn't know I was still mute. Thank you so much, Mr. Salman, for inviting me, and thank you for all the panelists to be here and talking on this very important subject and very urgent subject, very timely subject. We do have to put the enforced disappearances into context. I would like for all of those who are listening and who are watching and who are hearing about this issue for the first time, that this is one of the manifestations, human rights violations, specifically the enforced disappearances that we are talking about today. They are just a manifestation of the Indian military occupation that has been in operation for the last 72 years. And the fact is that it has been so well hidden from the rest of the world. And that's what the enforced disappearances, the question that how is it that a person can disappear and the country can still call itself one of the largest democracies, and it can also call itself having, Kashmir as one of its legitimate parts. So that's a question that the international community should be asking. Then going back to thinking about the half widows, which is a word that was coined by the local English media for women whose husbands were forcibly disappeared, we do have to mention that most of the disappeared, they were not combatants. These were non-combatants, and there are more than 10,000 disappearances. And currently, according to statistics, we have about 2,500 plus half widows. And of course, it's an emotional issue, it's a financial issue, it's an issue that one has to it's really heartrending to see what's happening, and also how these women have had to, for the last 33 years, combat this quite alone, because Kashmir, as we know, that the laws that have been put in place by India, especially the Armed Forces Special Powers Act, and there are several other draconian laws that are in place that make it a de facto and a de jure occupation. So we have to put disappearances into context and not just treat them as one thing, but it's a technology of torture. It's a technology of penalization that the Indian occupation has meted out, and it's one of the technologies of torture. As we see, the enforced disappearances were mostly prevalent in the 90s, and they went on till the early 2000s as well. But right now we see there are different technologies of torture in operation. So it should be seen as one of the tools that the Indian occupation uses on Kashmiris as a representational and as a manifest threat to the society if they are asking for their right to self-determination and independence. So that's the brief context that I wanted to put out and kind of give an idea of how to see and how to contextualize this issue, this very grave human rights issue. So then the second thing I also wanted to say is that we have to, start thinking about India. And I think it's very, very important to put this message out for the international audiences. When they think about India, they think about a lot of things. They think about ahimsa, which is non-violence. They think about, Mahatma Gandhi's philosophy and all of that. But that is not the Kashmiri vantage. Kashmiris from 1947 onwards, as they were illegally occupied by India, have lived in a very brutal direct and indirect military violence, and that has been invisibilized because the other thing that India used was it used the politics of democracy. It used democracy as a tool. It weaponized electoral democracy to tell the world that Kashmiris are taking part in elections and Kashmiris are moving towards integrating with India. And we know that it took them 72 years to forcibly annex India again in 2019, as you already said. And we also have to tell the international audiences that Kashmir is not an issue that started from 1947. Kashmiris, even before India and Pakistan became nations, have been seeking some sort of a sovereign prototype of a democracy. So we have to keep that in mind. And when we talk about enforced disappearances and the issues of half widows, we do have to know that this is not, we are not asking for simple solidarity for human rights issues. We are asking for solidarity for political rights. And once those political rights are restored to the people, the human rights violations will go away. And we also have to ask this question when we are talking about this and making the international community understand that if the human rights violations in Kashmir were to go away tomorrow, if India decided to take away AFSPA and all of that, would this problem go away? It would not, because it is a political dispute first and foremost, and Kashmiris are asking for their rightful right to self-determination and freedom. So that's how I would like to contextualize it, and then I will leave it to the rest of the panelists to talk more. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Zia. So succinct and so precise in your approach. And we're going to, as I promised, that we will have a series of webinar on the subject. We will be in detail unpacking the ecosystem, how it's affected the social, the moral, the psychological, and economical. Those are the widows, those who do not know whether the husband is alive or dead. They cannot go to the receive any pension. They cannot apply it for many other, I would say, the state-run facilities. So it's create a problem. Of course, it create a problem within our Islamic system. What do you do when we're waiting for 25 years for the husband to return? How does she, fit into the society? I would like to jump onto our special guest from Srinagar, the daughter, the nation, the daughter of the nation, and the daughter of our political prisoner and a freedom fighter, Shabir Shah. Daughter is on, and I would like us, she is have another webinar running currently, so I would like her to come on board and please give us a little bit of the rundown on what's happening on the ground. And yes, Seher, you're welcome, and do not feel that you're alone. There are millions of the people across the world. We are with you from South Africa, the strong Muslim community, as well as across the world, Muslim and non-Muslim are with you. So do not feel that you are alone or you're fighting this war alone. We all with you. Floor is yours.
Assalamu alaikum, everyone. I'm sorry I won't I won't be able to speak much today because of some reasons. So, as you all know, my father has spent 33 years of his life in imprisonment and is currently lodged in the Har jail. He is the person who started the freedom movement, as you people know. So today, about the half widows, I just wanted to say that even my grandmother, I must say, she also was a half widow, but not for a long time. But she also has been through that phase because my father was only 14 when he was first arrested, and police was in search of him. So the police came and raided my father's house, and they took my grandfather away, and nobody had out of nowhere they had taken him, and for many days nobody had an idea whether he's alive, where is he, how is he. And after some days, rakshak, I hope you know what is rakshak, that police car, it came with the dead body. They left it on the door and they went. And at that time my father was underground because he couldn't come out in people, because that time those police were searching him. And so in this case I feel my grandmother too was a half widow for some time. And also I want to say that my father is a Kashmiri leader, as all of you know, who has seen and suffered the agonies of slavery. And in his 33 years of imprisonment, he has been subjected to brutal tortures till his 20 years for reiterating an established fact and acknowledged truth. He has exhibited the high qualities of patience and perseverance, gentleness and sobriety. He was subjected to torture in the most notorious interrogation centers and prisons all over India. not only him but all the other prisoners, all the other political prisoners, I must say, like Mr. Yasin Malik. I call him Yasin uncle because I have seen him visiting our house. I have seen all of them. I myself am an eyewitness to many things that how the judiciary is going on here. There is no The judiciary has no role right now because they just deny. They say that we can't do anything. So justice seems far away right now. All we need is your support. I had a lot to say, but right now the time is not helping me. I had a lot to say, but inshallah, soon when I get time, or soon when things will get better, I will come up and I'll say a lot, because I have a lot to say. As I mentioned, that because of few reasons, I'm not able to speak up properly. So thank you so much.
Jazakallah khair, Afreen, 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 the courage, the courage, the courage. May Allah Ta'ala protect you. May Allah Ta'ala, give you the wisdom, give you the strength, and do not feel for a 1 second that you're alone. Our praise, as far as from the savannas, the jungles of South Africa, is with you, from the mountain of Alaska, from the Colorado desert, to from the Islamabad. We are with you in every single detail. That is definitely a very heart-wrenching account of the people those are living on a ground zero. And my sister, you are courageous. May Allah Ta'ala reward you. And I can see that my dear sister, the daughter of the nation, Michelle Malik, has also joined us, and she has requested that, of course, that she have many engagement internationally. She would like to say a few words as well. So I would like to invite her to the panel and say a few words and show the solidarity with the half widows. But before Sheher, go, and before my dear sister, both of you are my dear sister, I like to just pay a tribute in Urdu, if you allow me to. I say, ए कश्मीरी तेरी कश्मीरियत को सलाम करते हैं, ए कश्मीरी तेरी कश्मीरियत को सलाम करते हैं। हम तो उन माओ बहनों की अजमत को सलाम करते हैं जिनके दुपट्टे तले पले बड़े मेरे शुहदा गाजी। हम तो उनकी इज्जत और उनकी इज्जत और उनकी हिम्मत को सलाम करते हैं। So, this is my gratitude, and this is the way I feel, that it is you who giving us the strength. It is you who's giving us that hope that we must continue to fight, because of you standing in South Africa. When the Nelson Mandela was behind the bar, it was the Women League, ANC Women League, the Winnie Mandela run the campaign, and that was seen the victory. It was the Women League, those who marched in 1956 to the Union Building, and that was the time turning point for the South African history. They said in Africa, you hit the woman, you hit the rock. You are solid as the, I would say, Himalaya Kash mountain. Your courage and your strength is giving us a strength. So before further ado, I would like to ask Honorable, my sister, all the way from Islamabad, Michelle Malik, to say a few words in the solidarity and also explaining to us the pain of a half widow. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Sister Michelle, can you unmute your mic, and floor is yours.
Assalamu alaikum. I'm very grateful to the organizers for inviting me today, to the respectable panelist, Dr. ATHER, to Claire for being very supportive, and to Seher Shabir Shah, brave girl of brave parents, and to the rest of the listeners of this webinar. Unfortunately, I have a lot of press engagement. At the same time, I told Claire that I have a fever and this change of weather, flu and fever and cough. So I will be giving a short talk, and my views about the topic, which is very close to the heart of every woman, especially of a conflict or of a war zone. It's about half widows. And I think a lot of women in conflict zones, or even women around the world, if we talk about them, the challenges that women have faced over centuries and have fought for their rights, for rights of equality, and against harassment and sexual harassment and all forms of ways through which our rights have been violated globally. But I want to bring to your attention, to the speakers and the listeners, that um, it's individually, acts of sexual violence or harassment, they do take place all over the world, and we have seen heinous crimes being committed against humanity. But we've hardly ever seen, if we go back in history, that an act such as rape as a weapon of war being used and supported by the state. And it's not an individual act, it's something which is a weapon used against mainly the women and also children. And there is this concept or this title, that unusual titles that Kashmiri women get because of the prolonged nature of this conflict and it being highly militarized, is the topic of is the title of a half widow or a half mother or a half orphan or born orphans. So these are the sad titles that Kashmiri women get, Kashmiri children get, mothers who are continuously, waiting for years and years for the return of their son or their daughter. And the life is like a shuttlecock. I mean, between hope and fear. And then you have little children who are unable to decide if their father is going to return. Are they orphan? They're fatherless. They have this curiosity in their eyes, which is there for countless years, and nobody can tell for how long they have to wait. And for those sisters, for those who have these never-ending tears searching around, and also for those women who are married and their husbands have disappeared, and they have been waiting for their return for years, and they've become invisible, like ghosts. The search that they go through, the women folk especially, with all the economic burden falling upon them, because it is a traditional society, and women were not a lot into jobs before, but slowly and steadily, it not just by choice but by force also, they are the economic breadwinners of their families, their parents, or are looking after their in-laws, and then going in such challenging environment, searching for their loved ones who have vanished, going to the courts, going to the army camps, or going to the police stations to register their complaints, and being humiliated, being made to feel that you are a woman and you will be targeted for that, and you will be if you will, and you will be silenced. So that invisible fear, and also the visible one, and the glares that the women get by the army, I call that a rape as well, because any form of harassment it's something which can have very deep impact on your, not just your body, but on your soul, on your mind, on your confidence level, on the way you think. And there's a concept of shame. It's even now, even in the West, there is when you have to talk about child abuse or sexual harassments. You have these Me Too campaigns going on internationally, and you must have noticed that some of the victims, they after many years, they announce that somebody, their uncle or somebody, some relative or some friend, harassed them or sexually harassed them or raped them, and they didn't have the guts or the courage over the years to speak up against that violence. And they face a lot of criticism for that on the social media, that after how many years you suddenly woken up and you've decided to challenge the rapist. But I think it is the psychological impact, the post traumatic stress disorder, and it can take years to recover from it, or it can take years to build up that courage to say no to somebody or to expose someone. So these are things which are very, very common. It's a conservative society, Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir, and the women over there, some of them who are bold enough to get their cases registered of the missing persons, or of if God forbid rape has happened, or sexual harassments against children, also against youth in prisons. So it's not necessary that their complaint will be recorded. And secondly, there are many that I know of that would not go there, would not even speak up about it, because some things come in the under the shame or the taboo concept as well. So these are things, it's a very complicated situation for the women, the challenges that they face, and and they have no way of venting it out as well, because it's not for a year that you're under an unresolved or complicated grief. It's just like something that's ongoing because it's unresolved. The grief, the situation, the search of the loved ones, the atmosphere is gloomy. There's claustrophobia. Sometimes there's this invisible there's this what do you call the silence before the storm, and then suddenly there's a curfew. They're killing. So a lot of things are piled up against the women. The responsibilities, looking after the home, going out to earn, to study, and then the various legal issues surrounding the families of the missing persons, because they're not officially declared dead. They don't know where their graves are, or if they're dead. There are various unmarked graves over there. And then the confusion over the inheritance, say the property rights or bank transfers. So all these things which require a death certificate, a lot of those things are pending. So it's like it's a never ending pain for families also. And then the legal battles for searching, as I mentioned earlier. So that, the trauma, the socio-economic political conditions, and we have many international laws to protect women against violence, especially in conflicts and anywhere at all. And then UN has already defined it very prominently, that any act of gender-based violence that results in or is likely to result in sexual, mental, or suffering to the women, including threats of such acts, all these can be considered as grave crimes. And the rape against women in Kashmir as a strategy of state terrorism. It was in the international criminal tribunals on Yugoslavia and Rwanda, which were the first ever to define rape as a systematic use of war weapon against humanity. So it's a war weapon, and the Rome Statute of International Criminal defines that rape, sexual slavery, enforced prostitution, forced pregnancy, enforced sterilization, and any other form of sexual violence is of comparable gravity as a crime against humanity, and which, when committed as a part of a widespread or systematic attack against civilian populations. So this is a grave act, and it is instilled over here, this act, basically to humiliate the public, the civilians of that area, to dominate, to instill fear. So it's a game of fear, and forcibly to try to relocate civilian populations or to ethnic groups. So all these things are documented. There are rights for women, which unfortunately in Kashmir you would hardly see that the rapist or the killers being ever punished over there because of the immunity of the draconian laws. So it's something where unless and until we don't focus on the core issues, and I believe that um, there's no way of recovering from the trauma, the post traumatic stress disorder, because the environment as such is so unhealthy for the women to grow, to feel peaceful, to be relaxed, so it becomes very sensitive. I think because the core issue is so chronic, and it is the oldest pending issue in the UN agenda, that the world fails to realize that there are living human beings living there, unarmed, defenseless, and they want this issue to be resolved because it's taken such a heavy toll on so many generations over there. And I think it's not something which is impossible. It's enshrined in the UN. They want freedom, which is the right to choose, the right to self determination. That's the right that they should be given. And Kashmiris want a peaceful solution. They have never ever been a hurdle for any dialogue between India and Pakistan. But unfortunately, oh, it's been over 50 years, and it's been, the shelf life of dialogue has expired because no substantial results have come out of it. So I don't know when the world will decide, especially the UN, to take action against these war crimes that are being committed against Kashmiris, and they be given that right that is the right of every human being according to the Universal Human Rights Charter. Right now, my husband's locked up in Tihar. Many youngsters, many leaders, many people are locked up, and women, children, and youths in torture cells, and their families do not have access to them. They don't have that legal rights. And Yasin's in a death cell, and his health is already very fragile. But as a woman, I'm practically a single parent, you know. We are a divided family, and whenever I would go there on a visa, he would either be, in hideout because he'd given some call for protests against various violations happening there. Then for weeks he would disappear, or when he would come out, he would be locked up, taken to a police station or central jail. So we hardly got time to, be together in this marriage of like 12 years. We've hardly spent 60, 65 days together. The rest is like, very painful for us and very unnatural. But a lot of families suffer this division of divided families, or their loved ones are locked up for years and years, just like the previous case, Shabir Shah Saab's daughter, Seher, was explaining. So I can understand, she can't talk with full freedom. They cannot because they are always under the radar. I'm in Islamabad, so I'm talking like this in more detail. But I can understand, and I'm suffering for that as well. My husband is suffering, and I'm living a life literally of a half widow because I haven't been able to speak to my husband. I mean, for over 2 years. I mean, the basic rights of a prisoner in India as a signatory to Geneva Conventions, and I'm not getting that right to speak to him on the phone or to have a video conference with him, and he's not being given any rights. So I mean, how would he get this right as well? And our daughter is really, naturally she's upset. She's missing her father. She's only 8 years old, and she saw her dad when she was just 2 years old. So these painful divisions, and then becoming practically a single parent, the responsibility on a woman. And there are many times that it's very tough for me that, the trauma that we live in. I mean, the trauma attacks one keeps getting, that, oh, you wake up one day and, maybe, your husband is no more. That fear that keeps, it stays with the women, and I go through it as well. And the distance makes it even more painful for us. So these are things which need to be addressed by the world bodies. This is such a fragile, and it's just such a sensitive area. It is not just about Kashmiris living there. It's about the whole region's peace, which is linked, connected with this. And then there are three nuclear countries, loggerheads: India, Pakistan, China. Now the case becomes even more complicated. And there are economic interests of China with the CPEC and the Silk Route. So and then what's happening in Ladakh, and then you have the fascist regime in India. I mean, it's even against their own constitution, the secular fabric. So a lot of things are, very tense. But I'm glad that, there has been an LOC ceasefire pact. I welcome that I hope, because I'm always very, very, I feel that it's very important that we all internationally also work towards global peace. And this is one of the most dangerous uh, areas of the world that could explode, God forbid. Like 2 years back, there were nuclear codes exchanged between India and Pakistan. So we must
But
concentrate on the core issue. These are steps that we can take, but unless and until we don't go on the main core issue, you will see various incidents of rape and sexual violence as a weapon of war in Kashmir, and many other weapons being used. So by this hyper nationalist by this fascist thinking, and then after this demography changes and what's happening. So I really hope that there is international outrage on this, and Kashmiris have been fighting for their right for the past 7 decades, and
Thank
they
you,
continue
Baji.
fighting for their right to identity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Baji, because we have a little bit of a time constraint because it is the live radio coverage going around the world. I'd like to say thank you very much for, even you have a fever and you're not well, going through a lot of psychological trauma at the moment. It is not easy for 12 years of the marriage and spending 65 days. Really, all the Muslim world, including the civilized world, must hang their head down, not only because of the Mushal Malik, but all the women's, those are going through this trauma. We talk about in the West, in our civilized world, about the gender-based violence, including in South Africa, but what solidarity has been offered from South Africa or from the Western world to the women of Kashmir. I think Baji Michelle and Sister Michelle has left so much for us to think about it, and maybe we start showing the solidarity toward the people of Kashmir. We will continue to, inshallah, engage you. But once again, from us, thank you very much for joining us. Our next guest speaker is no unknown person to the cause, very, very prominent, internationally known activist for the Kashmir, Dr. SHAGUFTA ASHRAF. Dr. SHAGUFTA ASHRAF is an educationalist, public administrator, head of the Department of Banking and Finance, University of the Kotli Azad Kashmir, Azad Jammu Kashmir, director of a Geneva Business School and the Economic School of the Geneva in Switzerland. And she is a very, very, I would say, active in the activism for the human right defense for the Kashmir, and especially for the women right of the Kashmiri people. Dr. ASHRAF, floor is yours.
Thank you very much, the organizer and my really good friend and the friend of Kashmir, Mr. Khan, for inviting me. Mr. Khan, this is what a very well in time seminar you are organizing, because the women all around the world are celebrating International Women's Day, although it's a complete month in which women all around the globe are celebrating this day for their rights and all. But the irony is that we have dozens and numerous resolutions, conventions, articles and reports and UN reports and everything in hand. But even then, the women of Indian occupied Kashmir, the widows of Indian occupied Kashmir, the half widows of Indian occupied Kashmir, and the girls of Indian occupied Kashmir are still unheard. I mean, they are unnoticed by the UN mechanism and international fora. And this point is very, very sensitive to the hearts of the women of Indian occupied Kashmir, that for women of Indian occupied Kashmir, all the laws are just dust for. And for rest of the world, if something happens with even animal, the whole world stands up for the rights of even animals. And for women of Indian occupied Kashmir, all are silent. They have their vested interests. They have the business ties with India, and they are not even ready to hear the cries and the voices of oppressed and suppressed women of Indian occupied Kashmir. This is a real irony, and we really have to work on it, that what is actually the cause behind that. So the decades of conflict have left Kashmir completely devastated, its population profoundly and violently affected, and the future generations are completely bleak. Besides consuming Kashmiris, 3 generations of Kashmiris, the long-drawn conflict hangs like a sword of Damocles over their heads. The life of Kashmiris is sadly crippled by this protracted dispute. Over the passage of 73 years, Kashmiris find themselves trapped in the vortex of violence. We have 2 reports of Office of the High Commissioner for Human Rights in hand, where these reports contain the reference of systematic rapes and gang rapes and sexual violence and everything in hand. But even then, the world is silent on this particular subject. Apart from uncounted deaths and destruction. Violent conflict has created a humanitarian calamity of widening proportions. Systematic violence and state repression have inexpressibly affected the impacted every segment of society. The fact remains that no facet of life in Kashmir has been left unaffected by the brutal war that India has imposed on it. However, being a vulnerable segment of the society, women and the girls in Kashmir are worst victims of direct and indirect forms of violence, which the prior speakers have explicitly elaborated and defined different phenomena, which has left indelible imprints of conflict on their memories and minds. Sense of insecurity and the fear of being raped, molested, abducted, and humiliated and harassed by Indian troops outside, and not even outside, but inside home as well, is a daily routine of a living with for a Kashmiri woman and girl. This is what something routine that now they are not even safe inside their homes. So actually, in reality, women in Indian illegally occupied Jammu and Kashmir are facing state terrorism. It's a complete state terrorism by Indian occupation forces for the last 73 years, and not even a single perpetrator is being held accountable before law. We have survivors of Kananpur, and none of the victims, got the justice. Survivors of Kananpur are still waiting for justice. Widows and half-widows have unfortunately been the worst victims of protracted unresolved dispute that has left behind a harrowing legacy of abduction, molestation, rape, and disappearances. As a resulting of conflict and bloodshed and sexual violence and disappearances have shattered the lives of women, so much so that 36% of women in the occupied Jammu and Kashmir suffers anxiety disorders, as Michelle rightly said. We have, as I said, that we have dozens and numerous resolutions on women's peace and security. In 2000, the Security Council adopted resolution, the FEMS resolution 1325 on women's peace and security, followed by a number of resolutions on women's peace and security. Then again in 2008, adopted a landmark resolution 1820 of 2008, the first devoted to addressing the sexual violence in conflict situations. And the subsequent resolutions are 1888 of 2009, 1889 of 2009, and 1960 of 2010, focused particularly on preventing and responding to the conflict related to the sexual violence. And as I just mentioned, that two successive reports of the Office of the High Commissioner contains specific references to the mass and gang rapes incident in Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir, along with other HR abuses. Yet despite all these UN resolutions and reports and everything, Kashmiri women, widows and half widows do not receive the attention of the UN mechanism, which they are really looking for, and other international fora as well, and of course the international community, to redress the crimes against them and to bring an end to the sexual violence. Kashmiri half widows, that is, as explained by Dr. Athar Zia in her intervention, that whose husband disappeared in custody of Indian occupation forces. The exact number is unknown, but estimates suggest that the number is between 1,500 and 25 plus, as she rightly said. Unaware of their husband whereabouts, these women are not only under the grief that comes from being separated from their spouses, as Michelle said, and she was narrating her story, but is also constantly struggling to survive as well. Their husbands either still alive in the custody of Indian forces or not or dead at their hands, have not been declared deceased, and hence they are termed as half widows. And left on their own, these Kashmiri women makes ends meet to feed their children. Since their husbands have not been proclaimed dead officially, they face challenges in the inheritance issues as well. And because according to the Islamic rituals and norms, women cannot remarry unless she's not sure about the death of her husband. So they also suffer from trauma, different trauma and psychological issues, and constant fear of being mistreated by occupation forces, and that hunt actually torture and rape women at will. The social stigma is also attached with those women, adds to their miseries. But nothing is more heart-wrenching than the silence of their lips when their children, before going to bed, ask from their mothers that Mama, Amma, Abba kab aayenge? Abba aayenge? Mom, when is dad coming back? I mean, this span can only felt by a mother, because she's speechless. She can't say anything to her daughter, her son, that when he'll come back. She cannot tell them that they are in custody, they are being tortured, where they have been disappeared. So every night before going to bed, the widow and women of Indian occupied Jammu and Kashmir feels a death point kind of pain, because she doesn't have any answer which she can give to her children, that where they are. So this thing is very painful in international community, and of course, dominating society maybe do not accept it, that this only question that Abba when father will become back. This is equal to the death of a mother every day. That means she's dying every night, she's dying every second, she's dying every minute. So the horrors of women who suffers in the absence of their husbands are often left unnoticed. The untold and unheard stories of Kashmiri's half widows. There is story of every woman who is living in Indian occupied Kashmir. When you will talk to each and every woman, you will find a complete story, and you will come to know that this is the point where you can do anything for the sake of your family members. And these brave, I must salute that the brave women carrying on despite all odds, and they are exposing their stories, the real stories, what they are experiences at each and every forum. I mean, they go door to door and they share their stories, that what is happening with them. Their resilience is unmatched, and the struggle is unrivaled. Before ending my conversation, I would say that Kashmiri women conflict-related sexual violence is a call for a global action. We have dozens and dozens of resolutions. We have everything in hand, but unless the real action would not be executed, the miseries of women of Indian occupied Kashmir cannot be ended. And for that sake, we need solidarity. We need strong networks. We need the networks of women who can communicate the voice of voiceless, the women who cannot even speak on social media, on different platforms, because they are all the time under the surveillance of Indian occupation forces. There's a virtual, there's a perpetual curfew. They cannot come all the time. If even they dare to come and talk about what they are suffering, they have to, pay the price for that. So we need strong networks. We need education. We need solidarity, because only solidarity can break the chain of occupation. And this is what the last hope is. As far as I'm concerned, I have all the legal testimonies in hand. I used to show, this is your article, this is your resolution, this is your convention, this is your agreement, everything. But I'm helpless for some instance at times, that I'm not maybe able to convince them that just go UN and stop these human rights violations and put pressure on India to make it stop. And then with strength and hope that together we can inshallah do it. This is the hope we Kashmiri women have been carrying on and taking up and going door to door, corridors to corridors, UN, and every available platform we have in hand. We try to
Thank
go there
you.
and talk that what the Kashmiri woman, what the Kashmiri girl is facing. So thank you very much once again, Dr. Han, for inviting me. Thank you. And one thing, please, I really want to mention here. The case of the association of these half widows and disappearances with the mass graves. As you all know that in Indian occupied Kashmir, we found unmarked massive graves there. So the disappeared people, we believe that there's a need of DNA profiling of those who are buried in those mass graves. Who were those people? We suspect that all those people who have been disappeared will be in those unmarked mass graves. So I strongly request to the international community to put pressure on UN for the DNA profiling of the dead bodies who are buried in those mass graves. So thank you very much, Mr. Khan, for inviting me.
Thank you very much, Dr. Shagufta, and that's what was expected from a very active activist for the Kashmir, and especially for the Kashmiri women. You raised some very, very important points. Why the world is quiet? Why is the whole civilized world? It is an indictment on not only onto the Muslim Ummah, but it is on the entirely civilized world, that when there is a mass rape and the Indian state using to terrorize the women in Kashmir, while there is a deafening silence in the power corridor of United Nations. Very important. And I'm going to leave all of our listeners with a one question: what are we doing for a solidarity with the Kashmiri people? And another question that I want to leave it with you: then when the small child in Kashmir, Srinagar, asks the mother, when the father is coming back, just imagine what goes through the mother mind. I want to leave this into your thought process, and I want you to please come forward and show the solidarity with the oppressed people of Kashmir, especially the oppressed women of Kashmir. Thank you very much. I will ask all our listeners to please send us your comment, so we will be able to see if we can answer some of the comments. But before further ado, I'd like to say thank you very much, Dr. Shagufta, for your insight. Very important. We will continue to have this program. As I promised, will be a series of the program. But I would like to now invite our next guest speaker. Of course, I'm going to ask Nicolene to be a little bit more patient, because you are in Johannesburg. You are the host of this program. And of course, after Claire, I will have Nicolene from all the way from Johannesburg is speaking to you. Claire BIDWELL is a very, I got some echo coming back. I do not know why, but sorry, the next speaker is Claire BIDWELL. She is from all the way from Scotland, England, and very, very prominent, I would say, a teacher, educationalist, a writer, poet, and of course, you have joined the Kashmir liberation movement struggle a few years ago, and she's very vocal about the oppression and suppression, what's happening in Indian illegal occupied Kashmir, and she's very vocal in the British Parliament as well as in European Union. Claire, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. Thank you for inviting me along. I'm not sure if there is a problem with my mic or the feedback, but I'll carry on and see what happens. Yeah, I mean, it's great panelists here. I mean, Dr. ATHER framed it really nicely for us going in, talking about it being, you know, that hidden conflict, which it is. So from me on the outside, from an international perspective, unless I've gone looking for this, you know, and in a way, this whole episode fell upon my path just because of connections. Unless you go looking for it, it's still very much hidden. My task has been made so much easier then because of Shagufta, Michelle, and Seha being able to share the close, empathic, intense human stories that are out there, which I think, you know, we can all identify with on you know, the lower levels, the pain of like when you do lose a lost one anyway, or a partner or family, but let alone living under the oppression and what these half widows and widows are living with. It's traumatic. And so for me, I come at this from a human rights perspective. I come at this from an international perspective. I come at this from an ordinary human being in the world's perspective watching this. we are seeing growing repression, on human rights defenders, as India kind of resorting to new levels of violence, really, so that anything that's remotely anti-establishment is being portrayed as terrorism. And that is how it's coming out across into the international world. So all of this is India being seen as fighting a battle with terrorists. So they use various, laws and things to protect themselves against that. They've got antiquated laws in there themselves. They've got Armed Special Forces Act, the Public Safety Act, which they're using. We're also seeing like COVID restrictions at the moment, and evidence is suggesting that the quality of life in Kashmir has never been so dire as it is now. We have, so for me on the outside, we want to raise the awareness amongst so many people, but essentially to put pressure on our governments and then forward on to the United Nations. So, we feel very much that the UK has a duty of care to Kashmiris, a moral duty, and that right to go back and fix really the mess that they made. They were involved very much in the partition. But the other one, of course, is the human rights of women and how we look after women on an international scale. So there is the International Convention for the Protection of All Persons from Enforced Disappearances, which India are actually a part of, as are the United Kingdom. So they should take that forward. One of the things we know that we're up against is that on an economic level, India have such power and such ability to infiltrate through, and we're seeing that everywhere. So it almost seems that our governments aren't stepping forward because they're buying into the terrorism line and that India need to do this, and they don't seem to be looking at the bigger scale of human rights, I think, is what we feel. And that's where we feel that we need more from the people. But it's, testament to the Kashmiris and those that speak for them that are here today that can get that information out. We're finding, like, even myself now, obviously I'm on the outside, the restrictions against me are less, but we've seen there right now in Kashmir back in October 2019, where the India went in under the National Investigations Act and made it really difficult for human rights defenders in Indian occupied Kashmir to be standing up and speaking for people. They went in, they investigated them, they took documents off them. In the case of Amnesty International in India, they closed them down. So it's that way that anybody speaking up against the human rights is the issues is being clamped on. We're seeing journalism as being a crime now as well. And, so the voices are being clamped, their resources, their abilities to get this news out here are getting harder and harder. I myself have lost 2 Facebook pages. It might not sound a lot because of just speaking for Kashmiris and human rights, and obviously the level that the Indian lobby or whoever it is in there having their control over this. And so my very first page of it had 20,000 followers on it. The next one I'd managed to get up to 10,000, and I've lost them both, plus my own. And that gave a power to share news in and out. And essentially I was trying to raise the awareness to the international community. So, to get the voices so that when you go to your governments and you're lobbying, or when you're going to anyone, or you want more people to join, you have that power. So, that power is being lost. And then it's the resilience as a human rights activist to keep going, knowing obviously the reason you're doing it is for people suffering so much on the inside, but they're making it really challenging. There's the one lady, Parvina Hanga, who is she established Association of Parents of Disappeared People. She herself was investigated back in 2019, and never had witnessed such a level of intensity against her work. And now she herself was nominated as a Nobel Peace Prize winner in 2015. Such is the standard of her work and that she was doing. So we're up against big oppression. We're up against so much, and I think that brings us to, in a way, the right for self-determination, where that is something that we can all come together for as one. Kashmiris were promised their rights for self-determination. It's there under UN Security Council resolutions, and that's where some pressure and things need to go. And I think what we're hoping, internationally, is that we can bring the people with us. We can open more eyes of people, despite the limitations, to see what's happening and come forward. We're seeing such good examples of like Stand With Kashmir in America that have many ways to try and fight this and encourage people to, they have templates to write to Parliament. They too are constantly, sharing their news, and there are different solutions out there for that way to take that forward. I mean, ourselves working for Let Kashmir Decide, we're trying to unite, all Kashmiris from all ideologies and perspectives for self-determination, to come up to the level of humanity, put their differences and arguments aside. Our current campaign is to seek for the release of Yasin Malik, and all political prisoners. But obviously, as we go on that route, it's to raise awareness of Kashmir and the different issues that are happening. So, the suffering that is going on in there, I don't think any human being anywhere wants to be suffering over that. And then when we look at women and the rights of women, the international community have a right to stand up, I think, for widows and half widows, and understanding the psychological traumas and the real day-to-day traumas that they are having to live under and deal with. So grateful thanks for having this discussion today around International Women's Day, and for everybody here for contributing their part and helping to bring the plight of the Kashmiri women and Kashmiri story out into the public arena. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Claire. Thank you very much for making a time available. And there is a huge echo coming through. I hope they can hear me now. Yes, I can. There is no echo. Thank you very much, Claire, for coming on and be bold and showing your solidarity with the people of Kashmir, even though you do not have relative, but you said very vividly that as the human being, as the golden thread that join us as a humanity, that you see the injustices and you stand up, and more people like you need to be out there with a very much of a vocal about the issues. And what you mentioned is very, very prevalent, that it is in a hidden tragedy. It is a silent genocide in making. So much happening that the world doesn't know, because unfortunately is India control a mass market. It's in a huge market, and because of the international influence and their new liberalism and the political economy, nobody want to upset them, because they think that's a dumping ground for the product and their commodities. So India is making, I would say, the best of that situation, even though on the media and social media, as Claire mentioned, that has been India harassment doesn't stop there. But if we all stand up together in the solidarity, that's the storm that India will never be able to fade through, and we will be victorious, and Kashmir, inshallah ta'ala, will be free. I would like to now invite my dear friend, my comrade from all the way from Johannesburg. She is a very, very strong activist when it's come to the social rights and the social justice. Nicole is a social activist without a border and advocating for the social, economical, and political right for women and children across the globe. Injustices that what we were made to conform to by the systems knows no boundaries, and we have no limit. Moreover, the worship is of color, but we all need to stand up against this oppression. Now, further ado, I'd like to hand it over to Nicole. And Nicole is also a part of a United Front. She is, as I said, she is a strong activist for the women and children rights. Nicole, the floor is yours, and thank you very much for being so patient.
Thank you very much for inviting me to the platform. Thank you, Comrade Salman, and thank you to the panelists. It is a very touching subject, and as you had mentioned, that I am very passionate with the economical and freedom rights of women, social and political. So what is happening in Kashmir, I think I come from a country that has a taught me about Ubuntu. You know, Ubuntu simply means you are because I am, and I am because you are. So because of that, it is easy to understand what the women of Kashmir are going through. However, I think we need to understand, we need to really comprehend our real struggle as women across the globe. And in order for us to understand the women of Kashmir, what they are going through, I believe as now we are forced to celebrate the International Women's Day, and yet the women across the globe has been silenced one way or the other by a brutal system, a system that knows no boundaries. We are governed by a patriarchal system that has been going on and on from the beginning of the capitalist system, from the concept of the capitalist system, whereby a woman has got no voice. And it is such a shame and pity that the women of Kashmir are going through what they are going through now, not only silenced, but they are currently walking corpses because of what the system is doing, not only to those women of Kashmir, because what the women of Kashmir are facing right now, it is the fear of the present and the unknown. You know, not knowing where the bone of your husband is, not knowing where the bone of your child is, not knowing how your father looks like. You know, as women, we are life bearers. We give life, but yet we are governed by a system that takes away so much that takes away the life in us. We are exempted to raise the children in a way that they are future leaders for tomorrow. But yet again, they take our voice, they take our power in order for us to do what we ought to do in a way that best serves everyone, that best serves even Mother Nature itself. The women of Kashmir are facing insecurities, as one of the speakers was talking about, that sometimes I think they even want to change themselves. If they could, they would change themselves and be men, because now they are facing with issues that they have to be subjected to being objects, because this system had made them being objects, not only taking away from them their loved ones, but taking away the life that they possess. You know, being raped, being molested as children, because now when you raise these children, there's this say that says the world would be such a better place if all women would heal. But then you ask yourself, how does a woman heal when facing so much atrocities across the globe? Because now what the women of Kashmir is facing, what this system is doing to the Kashmir women, it's nothing new under the sun. This was done in Africa. This was done in Haiti. You know, it is the same trend over and over again, whereby a woman has got no place on this earth. But then the women in South Africa in 1952, they took a stand and said, enough is enough. So now what I believe as women across the globe, instead of celebrating Women's Day, what are we celebrating? We need to take a stand and give solidarity to the women of Kashmir and give solidarity to the children of Kashmir. What is the future of the children going to be in Kashmir? Because if a woman is wounded, how is she going to give? I mean, because you can't give out of an empty cup. So the women in Kashmir are forced to raise children on their own, and yet their husbands are out there. They don't. If they're not out there, then why is it the government not coming forward and instead using democracy as a blunder, which is exactly what is happening throughout the globe? They had blinded us with democracy. We are not free. We are not free as women. We are not free as human beings. And the children are crippled. And if the children, the mothers are crippled. If the mothers are crippled, then it means the children are paralyzed. Then it means we have got no world, because our world lies within the women's hands. So my solidarity, my heartfelt sympathies are going out to the women of Kashmir. We do understand the pain that you are going through. We do understand the severe of the deep hurt that you are facing, because that's what you are facing today, being silenced by circumstances and the law that rules over them, the law that's supposed to protect them. It is not protecting them. Instead, it's subjecting them to being objects just because they are a woman. You know, I remember there's one of the singers that says, "My sins are not worse than yours just because I'm a woman." You know, it's the same with women of Kashmir. By taking the husbands, the fathers, the sons, they not only taking away these males away from the society, but they are actually killing the society. So if you are killing the society, what world are we going to have tomorrow? What world? Because now I can imagine a 12-year-old child in Kashmir, a 12-year-old girl child in Kashmir is afraid to get married, not because they don't want to get married, because there's no role models for them to see the beauty and the love of marriage. They are afraid to be raised as women because they see the pain and the sufferings in their mothers, in their grandmothers' eyes. So what world then are we bringing? And what world are these women teaching these children? So it is a messed up situation, either way that you look at it. So at the end of the day, we cannot celebrate Women's Day because there's nothing to celebrate at the current moment. In South Africa, we've got high rate of gender-based violence, whereby every single day a woman is killed. Every single day, every single hour, a child is missing. So we all face the same struggle because of the system. If we do not understand the system that governs us, we are fighting a losing battle. We need to come together all as one and fight the system that is taking away so much from us, and fight a system that has crippled our being to the core. Because at the end of the day, we need to know that because we are only governed by those that think of profit instead of thinking of human beings. Because if you look at the trend that they are taking in Africa, they did the same because of the South Africans' minerals. And you look at the beauty of Kashmir, then you would understand that it isn't about just containing the democracy or whatever system or political system, but it is about how thick is their pockets. It is about the wealth that they want to accumulate, robbing those that really needs to benefit from from that wealth. So with that said, I stand in solidarity as a Black proud woman in South Africa. I stand in solidarity with the women of Kashmir. Your tears are our tears. Your struggle is our struggle. Forward with the women, because we do, as Comrade Sal said earlier, that in South Africa we say you strike a woman, you strike a rock. So it is about time that women leave their skin color, women leave their statuses, and fight together as one, irrespective of where you are, irrespective of the country that you are born and raised. Because the only way to end this struggle, it is for us women to heal, because it doesn't help that we are wounded. That's what the system is capitalizing on, our wounds. So let's learn from our wounds. Instead of nursing our wounds, let's go out there and make sure that the only way to heal these wounds, it is to face whatever that is, what it is to face the salt that is being poured on the wound, and to keep the wound bleeding, to keep the wound expanding. So the only way to do it, it is to stand in unity, to stand in solidarity. The women of Kashmir need to know that they are not alone, as much as the women in Africa, as much as the women in Haiti, who till date still do not know where their children are, where their husbands are, where their fathers are. So we're raising a generation. This thing it's been happening in Kashmir since the early 1940s, if I'm not mistaken, up until now. So at some point, the buck needs to stop. But the buck is not just going to stop with us talking. The buck will stop with us taking action. And us taking action, it is to make sure that we go forward, and we go forward fearless. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Amandla. Away too. In South Africa, we say people to the power. Away too. We shout this Amandla, and response is away too. It means power to the people and people to the power. So that's what the very, very strong, beautiful words. As usual, my firebrand, you have not disappointed me. And thank you very much for African women standing up with the solidarity. So beautiful to listen to you. As you say, what we going to celebrate, we should not be celebrating anything on a Women's Day, but we're showing the solidarity with the women of all the oppressed women of the world, especially with the women of Kashmir. Before further ado, I would like to ask Dr. ATHER, please, to round it up. And of course, before we do that, I just want to say that Claire BIDWELL is running a campaign for free Yasin Malik on her platform, which is available on our website called the Kashmir Global Movement. You can go and you sign the petition. There are many other petitions, but of course, the Dr. ATHER, yes, we're going to have a series of seminars like this, and specifically looking into the economic repercussion. We're looking at the social, psychological, and physiological burdens. So I'd like you to round it up and end up the program with your some words of wisdom. Thank you, Doctor. Can you unmute your mic, Doc?
Sorry about that. Thank you so much. It was so heartening to be here and listen to other comrades and panelists and activists and everyone who was here, from Seher to Mushal to Shagufta to Claire to Nicolene. I think a lot has been said, and we have given a lay of land of what's happening in Kashmir, and also connected it to the world order that is prevalent currently. And I think it was so opportune for Nicolene to kind of, I think she wrapped it up. I just have to bring it together a little bit. I was really touched by her saying that your tears are our tears, and I really take that to heart. And I really feel that's the solidarity we need. We need empathy, and Kashmiris need to know that they are being heard and they are being amplified. And it's reflected in Claire's solidarity as well. So thank you so much for your voice, and thank you so much for your presence. So I think the point that we would want to wrap it up is, like, why should world care about Kashmir? I know there's so many open wounds in the body, the geo-body of this particular planet at this moment, that Kashmir is one of those issues, and it's also very invisibilized. So I think Nicolene talked about the minerals and the resources. She talked about extractive policies that big countries have. And India is a part of that. And that's why I said we really have to start perceiving India not as a democracy. It's a neo-colonial, neo-imperial power that has been in operation, that has been left there to do what it is doing. And it is doing not in Kashmir is one such issue which has a very strong case for self-determination, and it's working outside Indian constitution. But when we look at India's own body and its own extractive economy, it becomes very clear that the neoliberal order is so heavily prevalent. The unraveling of India that's happening at the moment, that is a clear sign of the maldevelopment that has taken over its body. And that's where we kind of like, connect as a planet. That's where we connect as we cannot sustain these big, quote unquote, authoritarian fascist states that act like democracy, that use democracy as a weapon. And that's where we need to think together, because when we think about 2019, when India re-annexed Kashmir militarily and the world was quiet, and what did India sell to the rest of the world? What did they tell them why they're doing this? How did they create that legitimacy? Because, there are people who do look for those validations, and India gave them in the word development. It said, we will be developing Kashmir, as Claire earlier said, and Mashal also talked about this, that Kashmir is seen as India packages Kashmir as a terrorism issue, rather than calling them fighters or calling them, as what Kashmiris call them, mujahids or strivers. They're called terrorists, and it's easy for the world to buy it. It's the neoliberal order, which is also taking the lens of the Iranian stereotype of this, Islamic terrorism, quote unquote, and also wrapping Kashmir up as a terrorism issue. Or after 2001, it's become so easy for the world to accept such an explanation. And India kind of weaved development, that we will be developing this place. We will be opening up the economy. And opening up economy is really opening up the veins of Kashmiris and Kashmir and bleeding it to death and putting extractive economies in place. And in the last 2 years, that's what we've seen. We've seen Kashmiris get dispossessed from people who are collecting sand to having these big shark sand miners come into Kashmir and dispossess Kashmiris, and same for the land. And Kashmiris do not unduly fear that they are going, just like what has been done by the Israeli settler colonial state in Palestine. They are not unduly fearful of that. So this is about extractive economies as well that are masquerading as these democracies, so to speak. So on the other side of it is, I would also want to remind global audience or anyone who is watching us at the moment that we have to think India not just as a democracy that they have peddled so far, but as a neo-colonial state that is a neo-imperial state and has been acting like that with Kashmiris. And unless and until we do not tackle the political dispute of Kashmir, the human rights violations are going to continue. Even if they are going to ebb, it still is going to resurge, and that has been India's past. Kashmiris in every decade from 1940s onwards, and even before that, they were striving against the monarchies. But after 1947, they have in every decade strived and struggled against the Indian rule in different manners. And what we see now is that there is an armed resistance going on, but there is a lot of cultural resistance that the world should look at and try to understand. Kashmiris are writing, they're speaking, they're singing, they're doing every possible means of expression that they're using to tell the world that this is a political dispute and it needs to be resolved as soon as possible. And all my co-panelists, they have already laid out the UN resolutions, as Dr. Shagufta talked about, and she's given us a lay of land of how to tackle this politically or through an international intervention. So I think we don't have to reinvent the wheel. I think we already know what Kashmiris want, and they've been giving their referendum in blood for the last 72 years and more. And that's what needs to be amplified, and that's what needs to be heard by the rest of the world. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Doctor, for your wise word and rounding up very beautifully. And of course, the essence of your rounding up is that India is using its new liberalism order with a political economy, its size of the market of 1.2 billion people. For the last 73 years, we've been always relying on a power corridor of United Nations, which have a two set of rules. One is anti-Muslims or anti-African, which when the African leader or Muslim leader did not obey with international law and order, there is always the allied forces bombing and turning the countries into completely into the stone ages. But when it's come to the rapes and mass graves, there is no law and order, or no law become applicable. So this is the food for thought that we need to apply our mind to. And I would say for the 73 years, we've been searching our friends in the power corridor of United Nations on a top-down diplomacy, the top-down strategy, looking for the diplomacy, looking for the political solution. I think the time for a bottom-up strategy where the people-to-people solidarity, where the sister-to-sister solidarity, from the African woman to the Kashmiri woman, from the British women like a Claire to the people of Kashmir. I think this is the time that the international solidarity need to take a grip of what's happening in Kashmir. Otherwise, the silent genocide will be keep happening, and we will not know. And the civilized world, my message to you, my beautiful people of South Africa, you have just come out from the ashes of a very brute oppression. Please offer the solidarity, because when the dust will be settled, and inshallah ta'ala, Kashmir with this decade, after the 70 year of the operation, will be liberated inshallah ta'ala in this decade. The what will be remembered, it will not be the act and the word of our oppressor and the enemies. It will be the quietness of our friends, and the quietness and deafening silence of our friends will be remembered. With that, I would like to say Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. And once again, thank you to the Claire, thank you to Nicolene, thank you to Dr. Shagufta, thank you to Dr. ATHER, as well as to the Michelle Malik and our dear sister, young sister and daughter, Seher. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. God bless Kashmir. God bless South Africa. Aman Allah.